Oh my god, I haven't started recording yet. Okay, good thing I haven't done anything on the screen yet. So just to go over this once again, just for the recording, you have 5 types of variables: strings, which are lines of text; floats, which are numbers with decimal values; an integer is numbers without decimal values, as well as the mathematical integers; a boolean, which is either a true or false value; an enum, which is a special dictionary that we'll get to later; and then we have a struct, which is a combination of these 5 basic variables. Functions act on these variables, and classes are structs plus a bunch of functions. Okay. What an array is a collection of the same type of variables. So a bunch of floats, a bunch of strings, a bunch of booleans, a bunch of integers, any of that. Also, structs can also have arrays, and classes can also have arrays in them, because classes are basically a struct with different kinds of things. Hopefully that did not confuse anybody yet. Is anybody confused?
Since it's just programming, I'm gonna pop out since I already know about drop out since I already know about this stuff. So
Okay, see ya.
see ya.
Hey. Sorry.
Okay, so where are you confused on? Okay, what is Cell confused on? Okay, what are you confused on, Micus? A struct can contain different types of variables. Yes, Hellaswa. You can have any combination of variables that you want. For example, a string and a float, and another string and another 2 floats, and a few integers, and basically you can keep on adding and subtracting as much or as little as you want. Okay, there is no such thing as private. We're not going to deal with private and public here, because there is no real private and public in blueprint scripting, so don't worry about that. Okay, so Cell, do you know, not do you know, but are you still confused, or do you understand? Okay. Katie, are you here? Okay, so do you understand everything, or are you stuck as well? And answering Aegis or Cell or whoever's on that account right now, a function is just an action on the variables that does something to them. Yeah, y equals x is fine as well.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so one other thing is that
Me. Okay, great. So
Hi, Sal.
hey Sal.
Um, okay.
Okay, that was weird.
I think she just hit Aegis.
Yeah, I think it's an echo because I think they both on phone, so it just echoes through. Let's see. What else? Um, okay, so basically, Micus, if you're confused, you can just think of it like there's different variables because they're all unique and different from each other. And structs are things that combine them together, and functions do stuff with these variables. They can take in structs, pretty much. So first of all, I guess I'll show you how to access all of these in the engine. So most of these you can access inside the blueprint editor. So you can right click and just say float. Actually, you have to create a new variable. So over here you create new variable, and then you click this button right here, and it can be any of these. So those are just some examples of the ones that are most commonly used. The boolean, the integer, the float, and the string. Okay, do you guys see that? Don't worry about setting it up yet, but this is where you usually find your variables. It makes sense, right? Everything's underneath the variables category on the left, and you just press this plus button, the new variables over here. You click on the icon, and it shows you what different types there are. So structs these are the pre-made structs in the engine. So you can consider these like black box structs, except you can analyze them and figure out what they are. For example, if I turn this into an advanced effects feature, what you can do is you can drag this out, you can get it, and you can break it apart and see what it is. Okay, it seems like it contains a blend mode and a blend mask, and those are two other types of variables, pretty much. Okay, is everybody still with me here? Yep, there are colored lines. See the kind of the tic-tac-toe board over here is a indication that it's an array. The single colored line means that they're variables, and the tic-tac-toe board indicates that they're an array. Okay, now let's talk about an example which we can technically use to think of how we would create a character. So a character needs to be able to have some stats. Or not, wait, not necessarily a character. Let's just do stats for right now, because we're looking at the character stats component. So what we have here is a bunch of functions. As you can see, there's a long list on the top left. And the interactions on how to apply damage and buffs. Don't worry about the interactions at the moment. Let's first go with calculating the stat values. So if you take a quick peek at the Glory game mechanics, you'll see the exact calculations for how to get HP, MP, as well as strength, intelligence, vitality, and spirit for each class, as well as what strength affects and intelligence, vitality, and spirit affect. So it's the third post from the top. So can everybody take a quick look at that first and tell me when you're done? You guys still there?
Yeah, I think it would be better if you just show the function in the stream and go over it step by step.
Yeah, I'm gonna go step by step how we would implement those stats, pretty much.
Because otherwise some guys will die of confusion.
Okay, so let's start with HP and MP, right? So HP and MP, when you look at the calculations in there, it says HP is increased by 100 per level. Each point in Vitality also increases HP by 10 times the class growth scaling. MP is increased by 50 per level. Each point in Spirit also increases MP by 5 times class growth scaling. Okay?
Open it!
So now let's look at the code for that right here. So if you look at it, you see there's several things that you need to calculate, and that is HP and MP. And they're based on, so HP and MP are the outputs, and you need the level as well as vitality and spirit. So your inputs are the character level, the character's vitality, and the character's spirit. So ignore this break attributes instance for a moment and pay attention here. So these are the inputs as stated before. You need to multiply the level by 100 and then add the vitality times 10. Right? Exactly as stated there. For the mana, you need to do the level times 50 plus the intelligence times 5. Once again, just state it exactly word for word and exactly how it's written. So basically what these nodes are technically, you can consider them just math operators or functions. So over here, the level of the character is taken, you drag it onto this node, so this value equals this value here, and the level is then multiplied by 100 because this is a multiplication node, right? And then the result of that is added to the vitality times 10. And the result is fed into the max health. Okay, I'll zoom things in a bit more so it's clearer. How about that? Can you guys see now? Don't worry about the blue things. First of all, does everybody understand why this works? This is what visual nodal scripting for Unreal Engine 4 looks like. See, the green is the color of a float. So as you can see the type of level is a float, which means it has a decimal value. Vitality is also a float, and intelligence is also a float. So the color coding here just tells you what type it is. Now the blue type on the sides, that's the color for a struct. So
Okay,
these,
so if I say like this green stuff, like the first row of green stuff is like stats, and the second row like adds the stats together, kind of
Yep.
like the multiply thing in like the material editor, right? And then they like go into those things, and those things are like those two stats that get added together are what calculate the final stat.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
That's how it works. Micus and Hellas Hua and Focus. Do you guys understand? No, but keep going. What about you, Cell? Do you understand? Cadia and Asphyxia. Wait, Asphyxia, did you just join us?
I joined like 2 minutes ago. I
Uh,
couldn't make it in time because I had to, I was getting yelled at to eat dinner.
okay, so how much experience do you have with programming?
Only Java.
Okay, so can you understand what's going on here in this image?
Sure.
Is that a sure just because you want this to get this over with, or is that sure because you actually understand?
50-50.
Oh my god. So look at finalized Gloria game mechanics and look at the calculation for HP. HP is increased by 100 per level, and each point in vitality also increases HP by 10 times the class growth scaling.
Oh wait, yeah, I understand. Okay.
Okay, there you go. Okay. Hellas Hua, do you understand? Okay, there you go. Don't worry about you'll notice that there is no class scaling value that's also multiplied into here. Ignore that for now because we don't have that yet. Or actually, no, we do have that. Sorry. What I mean is it's not included here, but it's included previously. Okay, so by extension, how do we make a stats component? Basically, how do we make the character stats? Because we have all of these things that we need to calculate. So as you can see, this is not the only thing. This just calculates the resource stats, basically the values that can increase and decrease when you're playing the game, which includes max health, current health, max stamina, max mana, and current mana. And this is a make resource stats instance. Okay, now what this is this is a struct. This is a struct of 6 floats. So how do we create structs in Unreal? We just right click here, and then we go to Blueprints, Structure. And that's how you create it. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Now let's open up that resource structs. So resource stats instance, that's what we called it. I think instance is what Jordy usually names it, so that's why I used his naming convention. So as you can see, a struct is just this kind of UI thing that allows you to add new variables. Like you literally add them here, you name them, blah 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 blah, and you choose which type they are, right? And then you can remove them if you want, and so on and so forth. Exactly, so making structs and stuff like that is really easy here. So if you were to say, what are all the variables that exist? Well, we have the basic attack stats, which are Okay, so let's look at this for a moment. Initialize level 70 battle mage. So what we do here is we have all the stats that we need to do. Is we initialize the level and the amount of stat points that the character has. And level stat points, quest stat points, skill points, and skill book skill points are all like unit stats. In other words, things that your character has. Okay, I should reword that. It's not what your character has, but it's unit stats is basically a catch-all for stats that don't belong in other categories, in a sense. Okay, so then we have class scaling stats. So these are all floats, and you can set them here. And if you were to look at each of these instances, you would see a list of floats, and these would be the names of the 4 floats. So I set strength to 3.5, intelligence scaling to 3.5, vitality scaling to 2.5, and spirit scaling to 2.5. Okay? So as Micus can pretty much tell you, that's the scaling for the battle mage. Then we set the base armor values, and then we set the effective armor values. We set the weapon damage values and the effective weapon stats. The reason why there's a base value and a effective value is if you look at the list of calculations, you'll see that physical attack equals base weapon damage plus a value that's affected by strength. So base physical damage is the base damage of your weapon, and effective physical damage is calculated through that equation. And then defense or physical damage reduction and magical damage reduction is based on armor and the attacker's level. So that's why there is a base physical armor, and then you have a effective physical damage reduction. Yep. And let's see what else. Okay. So here we have the first actual function that we created to calculate our stats, and I'll open it up. So remember, these blue nodes are all structs. They're just a collection of a bunch of variables with names. And since we set these values and we set these values over here, then we can add them together to get our strength, vitality, intelligence, and spirit values. Basically the base attributes for our class. Okay, so it seems like I'm losing a lot of people here. Can you guys tell me how many you guys understand this, or how are you guys lost?
If I can propose something, why not try to make a simple function, so completely out of nothing? Just show them how to can like 2 boxes. Just make a new
Okay.
function, and with like 1 variable, and then make 1 function or one box out of it. Just so they got the understanding
let's
how
see.
the function works.
Let's see. What can we do? Okay, we'll do something that I haven't done yet actually for the stats thing, and that is the stamina system. Basically, if you walk, then you use up, let's say, 1 stamina. If you jog, you use up. Okay, if you walk, you regain 1 stamina. If you jog, you do not regain stamina, and if you run, then you use up 1 stamina. Everybody understand that so far? Okay, so first of all, we already have a system that gives us stamina, so we can literally go over here and just go to effective stats and drag out an effective resource stats. So get it, and let's break it apart. When we break it apart, we get all its values, but we only want stamina values. Okay? And not only stamina values, we only want its current stamina. So you can unclick these pins over here, and it shrinks it. We'll call this drain stamina. Okay, so we have 3 states, right? We have a walking, jogging, and running state, right? So quick thing, if you drag this out, then it's context sensitive, which means the functions that you can do to it will be listed here, and you can literally press these click these drag down arrows, and you'll see all the possible options that you have. But you can just do a minus float, and then and it would automatically figure out that you're looking to subtract a float from another float. It automatically puts this on top. So, okay, already it is subtracting 1. And now we need to set the stamina to its new value. So, set stamina. Okay, that doesn't work. So we go over here, we go once again to effective resource stats. Down here, we drag it out, and we set it. We're setting the value this time. So once again, we need to expand the node so that we can set each of its individual components. We don't want to set all of these to 0, so once again, we go to the default category and make it so that we're not changing anything else besides current stamina. Okay, so you can see over here, the set has a white arrow going in and a white arrow going out. And this is where you drag in your function starter. This is the start of your function, and this is the execution line. The white line is the execution line. Basically what it will do. So it will, as soon as this function runs, it's going to set the current stamina to be 1 less than it previously was. Okay, does everybody follow me so far? Okay, so but as Lemny has noticed, it only when you set values do you have this. But every time it goes and hits a set function, what it does is it goes to the beginning of that connection and then starts executing this. For those of you who have programmed before, this is essentially the same as when you run a function and then it starts at the beginning line of the declaration of the function. So this entire thing here can be collapsed into a function. And like you can literally do it here, collapse to function. And it creates a function right there. When you get a value from somewhere, normally in programming languages, you would have to write that out and execute that line. But in Unreal Engine, you only have to connect white lines when you're setting values. You also have to do it for events and stuff like that, but for now, just think of it as just setting values. Is anybody confused right now? It is a little bit visually counterintuitive and a little bit weird. No, we do not have any if or then statements yet. So anytime this function runs, it will reduce the value of current stamina by 1. Right? This is what we want to do for when we're running. Right? There's no choice here, or different options currently. This is only the functionality for running. If you guys understand, please do please say you okay or understand or something like that, so I can get a general idea. When statement. What do you mean by when statement, Hellaswa? Okay. We'll do the when later, and I'll show you how you can do that really easy in Unreal. Because if you were to do this in a pure programming language like Java, you would run into like a massive headache.
Yeah.
Yep. Basically, whenever this function runs, whenever we call this function drain stamina, then we will lose 1 stamina from our character. So like drain stamina is also a function. Like it will have, if we look outside of here, if we look at the event graph over here and we just go to drain stamina, we can call it over here using something. If it's like when the game begins, we can call draw stamina and it'll just reduce the stamina by 1. That's what event begin play is. As soon as the game starts, then do this, then this, then this. Yes, pretty much. Hishimaru. No per what? Hell is what? Every time we just call the function, right? You've done Java before, you know how you call functions. So every time you recall the function, we just reduce stamina by 1. Okay, be right back. I'm gonna use the restroom for a sec.
So like the function is like a box of stuff, code, and every time you need this box, you can call it. That's what he did there. So every time we need to reduce the stamina by 1, you call this function and it will do it. You don't have to code it anymore. Never.
Okay, I'm back. And one last call is if anybody doesn't know or is confused, please say something. Okay, let's continue. So now we have the run functionality, right? We're reducing stamina by 1. But that's not enough. We need to put in walk as well as jogging functionality. So let's do this. Let's create an enum. So before we said a enum is a dictionary of selections or a dictionary of options. So let me show you how you first create an enum. We go back to our library over here, and we right click, I guess you could say the windows or the file manager. We go back to blueprints once again, and then we create an enumeration. Enum stands for an enumeration. As it says over here, an enumeration is a list of named values. So we'll call this movement state. Actually, no, stamina state. And let's open this. So at first we start off with nothing. And what enumeration is at its core is basically a list of all the possible options you have. You can pretty much use strings to do the exact same thing, but enumerations are really nice because they help you organize your thoughts in a way and allows you to categorize things easier. For example, an enumeration, an enum for a stamina state would be walk, jog, and run, right? So literally, we just go over here, say new, and put in walk, jog, and run. You can also add descriptions, but you don't need to. So for example, we could say, walking regenerates stamina by 1. Keeps stamina the same. And run reduces stamina by 1. Okay. Are you guys fine with that right now? Hello Squad, did you miss anything about the enumerations? Okay, what are you confused about? So enumeration is basically a list of all the possible options you have. As you can see, there's no type for them. So an enumeration is not it doesn't have a type to it. It's not like a float or anything. It's just a list of the possible options. So basically, for example, if you wanted to create an enumeration for weather, it could be sunny, rainy, cloudy, thunderstorm, for example. It's a list of the possible options that you have for anything. In this case, we have the walk, jog, and run options. Is there anybody else? Is there anybody who's confused right now? Yeah, it doesn't affect the variables, and it can't be called like a method. Exactly. No, it cannot function as an array either. It cannot. It's just a list of the possible options. You can think of it as the different states that exist. Okay, now let's save this and use this in our program. Oh, it's over here. So now we're going to get into if statements. So we first have to create a new variable, and this is going to be called right here. And now we can select stamina state. See, once you create the enumeration, it will automatically appear in your search list. You enter that, and we'll just call it character stamina state. We'll just drag this in here and get it. So a stamina state basically is one of those options. The character stamina state, if you create an instance of an enumeration, then you can select one of those possible options. Okay? So let's cut off this node right now. This is Alt left click, by the way, and drag this back again. And now let's say if we look for an if, and it appears as a branch, and this is what happens over here. So we say, is the character stamina state, and here's what you can do, equals means, okay, so equals in programming is almost always setting something, while doubles equals means is it the same thing? Hello, Mariami. We're doing an example on how programming is done in Unreal Engine 4. What we're doing is a stamina system where if you are walking, you regen 1 stamina. If you're jogging, you don't use up any stamina. And if you're running, you use up 1 stamina. So what we first have here is a system for reducing the current stamina by 1 and then setting it back to its current value. Or not setting it back to its current value, but updating it with its new value. So let's say we're walking. If walking is true, whoops. Move this a little bit to the left here. If we are currently walking, then we want to set the stamina state, or not set the stamina state, but set current stamina to be plus the +1 of what it was previously. So let's copy this and paste it over here. And instead of minus, we can do plus float, float plus float. Delete this and reconnect this here. And if it's true, we go over here. Now, if it's false, we do something else, of course. If it's false, then we create another branch, because there's 3 states, remember? So that means we need 2 branches to get all 3 states. 2 branches or 2 if statements. Copy this again over here. Whoops, don't need that one. If we are jogging, if that's true, don't do anything, okay? If it's false, then we do this. Because if it's not walking and it's not jogging, then the only other option is running. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
Well, I feel like that's impossible since you just came on.
But I feel bad that no one's answering you.
Well, I thank you
There's
then,
so
Paul.
many messages though.
Lemony
The
got
screen
tired.
can't keep up. Okay, there we go. Discord is back to normal.
Yes, this is being recorded so you can rewatch this later. Okay, Lemny, just think about it for a moment. What we want to do is, if we're walking, we want to increase our stamina by 1, right? If we're jogging, then don't do anything to the stamina, right? Your brain is too tired. There's only 3 cases. You either walk, jog, or run. And what you do in each of those cases is add stamina, don't do anything, or increase stamina. No, add stamina, don't do nothing, or reduce stamina. My bad. So when this function is run, you check, are you walking? If you are, then you go to the true branch. Then you see, okay, I take my current stamina, I add 1 to it, and I set that as the new current stamina. Okay? If I am not walking, then I check, am I jogging? If I'm jogging, then don't do anything, right? Because we're not changing stamina anymore. But if that's false, then we know that we are running, because that's the only option left. And therefore, we just take the code that we had already and set the new stamina value to 1 less than it was previously. Exactly. It's an if, else if, and then an else statement, for those of you who are programmers. This is just what it all visually looks like. You can also highlight something, and let's drag this over here a little bit, and create a comment. And this one would be, if walking, increase stamina by 1. Maybe this will help. Just give me a moment. If jogging, don't do anything to stamina. Ah. Okay, maybe putting it in a line will be easier to see. Else, reduce stamina by 1, because we are running. Okay, right here. If walking, increase stamina by 1. If jogging, don't do anything to stamina. Else, reduce stamina by 1 because we're running. Never trust edited comments. Focus, asphyxia cell. Do you guys understand this? self/aegis. Are you still there? Do you understand this? Focus said, okay, Focus said he did understand this. Let's see, who else? Katie understands it. Micus is still a bit confused. So Micus, where are you stuck on? Okay, so what are you stuck on as well? Okay, you kind of get it. Okay. Hellas Hua, do you understand it? Maria me. Um, I know it's a little bit rushed, but how much do you kind of grasp at the moment? Okay. One thing you might notice is the colors. The light green means it's a float. The blue means it's a struct. White just simply means it's the execution line. As you can see, the calculations for the variables are not in the execution line. Every time you hit an execution, it's almost always setting a value. And every time you hit setting a value, it does the mathematical calculation right then and there. So you can kind of think of it as you created a function, or each set, you created a set function for every calculation that you do. Okay, now that we said it, let's make it so that we can actually see the results, or see what the values were. So drain stamina, we're just going to place another node here, and this is going to be a print function. It's going to print a string, and it's going to print the initial stamina. Okay, append. Append is a function that just brings a bunch of strings together. For example, if you said hello and a world string and you append them together, it would be hello world without any space between the O and the W. So what I'm going to do over here, as you can see, this is a string and this is a float. So that's why there's this node that disappears here, because it automatically converts the float number into a string. Okay, let's see, current stamina. Put a space right there so that the numbers are not squashed together with the string. And then after we are done, then we do this. We print a string again, and we print its current stamina. Or actually, even better. I'll show you how to use the functions specifically. Let's see. Get resource stats, break the node apart, get its current stamina. Oh, don't worry about that. Append. So we have this, we take the current stamina, we drag it in, we remove all of these other nodes. And what you can do right here is this is going to print out what the current stamina is at this point in time. As you can see, there's an execution triangle right there. So what we can do is we can drag select, right click one of the nodes in there, and do, oops, collapse the function. And it becomes a new function, and we'll rename this, let's see, print current stamina. Oh, whoops. Rename it new function 0. Yeah, I guess we'll have to rename it here. Print current stamina. We'll compile that for a moment and save it. Now go back to the drain stamina function. Can delete this now. Delete this mess over here. And then we can drag the print current stamina function out. Connect this here, connect this here. Copy, paste, paste, and paste. So we'll print it once again. And this will just show us what the previous value was, and then what its new value is after pressing a button, for example. Now, how do we get button functionality? You can only do this in the event graph, right here. And let's see. How about this? Now, this might be a little bit confusing. So bear with me, and then if you have any questions, please ask as soon as you're confused. So this is a character stats component. This is not the actual player character itself. It's a component that you attach to the player character, so that the player character has all the functionality of these functions here. So therefore, once that is done, we can close this out, and then we can open the actual player character class. Now, don't worry about that. If you right click here, then you can go, let's say F, input. Then you get a keyboard event. This gets run every time you either press or release. And these execution lines will show you that. And then you can go drain stamina. And you can pull that out. Because the stat component, as you can see over here, is within your player character. So this is something that we haven't said yet, but classes can be placed in other classes. So the stat component class is placed inside the player character class, and that's why you can access the functions of the stat component within the player character. Okay, compile, save this, and we can play it. Let's see. So as you can see, the previous one was, okay, so they appear from the bottom to the top. So the top is the newest post. So every time you click it, you can see that the current stamina is increasing. And that's because the initial state is set to be walk. Because because if you don't set the enum to be anything, it'll be just set to the first value that you placed in that list. So that's why it's defaulting to walk, and it's currently increasing the stamina every time you press F. You can just spam it as much as you want, and that's the convenience of the Unreal Engine. You can turn keyboard events into execution lines really quickly, and get functionality out gameplay-wise extremely quickly. So let's do something else here. So what was it called? Character stamina. Okay, right here. Let's do something else, and let's do 8, 9, and 0. So 8 input. When it's pressed, we can set it to the walk state. Okay, drag this over a little bit. 9 input. Okay, so let's set it so that when we press 8, then the character stamina state will be a walk. If we press 9, it'll be a jog. And if we press 0, it'll be a run. Okay, so we know that it initially starts at walk, so let's not press 8. Let's press 9. See if the value changes. Okay, you can see the current stamina does not change no matter what, because the current state is in a jog right now. Now if we press 0, you probably can't see the change here, but I'm pressing 0. Then we start to lose stamina. You can see the value is going lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. If we keep on pressing it. Now let's press 8 and see what happens. Now once again we're back in the walking state and we're regaining stamina. So Unreal Engine, it's really powerful, really easy to use for creating functionality for your code and using keyboard inputs and stuff like that. Really nice. Once again, 9 for jogging, so the value is not changing. And then 0 for running again. The stamina is once again decreasing. Okay. And that is how you would make a stamina system, for example. Any questions? Aegis, asphyxia, and focus. Do you guys understand how that works? Hellas, Hua, Kadia, and Lemny. What about you three? We can talk again, Lemny, on other voice chats, and I can explain it to you then, since you're much more active on voice chats, right? We're not doing work about you, Katia. Why would we do work about you? Maria, me, Micus, and Paul, you guys got it?
I think, yeah, it's pretty much like C++ in spaghetti format, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm.
You
That's
connect
what.
nodes together visually, and you do the calculations. Of course, the calculations are not as quick as just typing them out, but it's nice to follow the execution line of them, and you get keyboard inputs and events right out of the box, pretty much.
I'll check out the recording data and see how you code it up. But I think I pretty much understand how it works because yeah.
So for those of you who've done coding before and found it really difficult to have one class refer to another class and that other class to refer to this class, there's a solution around that in Unreal Engine 4 that's really unique. And what that is, let me see if I can find an example of it. Let me see, it probably is here. Okay, add buff and update effective stats. Okay, no, not that one. Let's see. Nope, that's not it either. Okay, I can't find it right now, but what you can do here is, because all of the functionality is in components, what you can do is you can access the owner of the component every time you attach it to something. For example, normally in coding, you have one class be inside of another class, but a component, you can kind of think of it as like a plugin. You kind of plug it into it, but you can remove it at will. So what this allows you to do is every time you connect a component to another component, you can use a node called getOwner, and it literally lets you access the class that it's been plugged into. And then what you can do from that is, like, let's say this class has both a buff system and a CC system, and those two need to interact with each other for some reason. So what happens there is you can access the owner of the buff class, which is the player character, and then you can use another function or node called getClassByComponent, which allows you to connect a component to that node. In this case, for example, a CC component, and then you can access the other component. So you don't have to worry about circular references or anything like that if you guys have experience with that. That's a much more advanced programming concept, though, that you wouldn't.
Can we change the parents value though? Like if you are taking data from another class and we just want to use it.
If you
We are
want to
not.
change
Are
like
we?
the parent's value, you can. If you want a
Oh,
parent
we
to
can.
change the child's value, you can. Is what I'm saying. Is like you can
Oh,
change
okay.
anything from anywhere, and you can access anything
Interesting.
from anywhere. That's the key thing about this, because in C++ that is really difficult to do. You have to get an
Yeah.
organizational structure completed that puts all classes within a really good hierarchy that you can access. But in Unreal Engine, everything can be accessed by anything.
Okay.
So my guess, I guess what you want to take away from this, because you're not necessarily going to be learning programming and actually writing some code, right? So what I want you to kind of take away from this is values need to be moved around, and they can be moved around through these branches, right? If there's different states, then do different things, right? So what mechanics are easy is ones that have very few states that you can cycle through, because you have to manually set what each of them does, right? It just makes sense, right? If you have too many different situations that you need to address in real life when doing something, then it's difficult to do because you can't remember what all those steps are very easily. In this case, it takes a long time to write what you have to do for each of those different options. Another example that we did not touch on, which is the arrays. Like, how do you do a buff system? Well, remember how we talked about arrays? A buff is a structure that says that's a collection of stat values, because this can be added to the current stat values to get your effective stat values. So what you do is you add all the stat combinations in an array of stats. Okay? And then you just check what its expiration time is, and every time it expires, you remove it from the array. And then you recheck what the combination of stats are that are remaining in the array, and apply that. So that's what arrays are mainly used for. When you have to have some dynamic nature, where after every few moments or after a certain period of time, the state has changed, and therefore you have to update the sum of all the buffs, or the sum of all the CCs. That's how the CC system and the buff system works. You add a buff to the array, you sum the effects of all the buffs, you apply it onto the character. If a buff expires, remove that buff from the array, resum the remaining buffs, apply it onto the character. So this is the kind of thinking that you have to do. And most of it is fairly simple on a logical perspective. But once you understand how arrays work and how branches work, or branches or if statements work, then you pretty much understand the majority of programming. Because everything else is just creating a struct that you can use. For example, in the resource struct, we created a struct that had HP, MP, and stamina, because those were all resource stats. In other words, stats that can be increased and decreased. Unlike attribute stats, which are used to calculate other stats, for example. So you categorize things, and then you just use if statements, loops, and arrays. Haven't got to loops yet, but updating what's it called? Updating the buffs and updating the CCs can be put in a loop, for example. That was probably a bit longer than what would be easy to understand. But let's see, how many of you guys still understand that, and how many of you guys are completely lost? Don't worry, Lemney. We'll explain it to you over and over again. Programming is just basically a few rules that you have to follow. Or not rules that you have to follow, but the rules that the computer follows. And basically what you do is you try to create an order of doing those rules that allows you to do what you want, pretty much. Micus is so lost. Nice, Mariami. Well, you have experience in JavaScript and web development, so if I'm pretty sure it clicked pretty fast. Oh yeah, then it's completely fine. But the thing that the thing that I guess you really want to take away from this is that you can access the parents of functions or the owners of functions, the owners of classes, and you can access the children of classes from within the class itself. That is something that's supremely useful. Okay, right here. Here's an example. The damage source is is an object. You can get the owner of that object. Oh no, it's a character interaction. So this is why Jordy created a character interaction class. What that does is every time you pass something from one part of the character to another part, you pass a character interaction component. And you can kind of consider it as a reference to the class itself, or a reference to a component whose owner is the class that that everything is nexused or centered on. So you just pass an interaction component, you get the owner of it, and then you get a component by class. And in this case, it's a character stats component, right? And as a result of that, you can pull that out and get the level of that. Because what this is, essentially, apply damage, is you're applying a damage to one character that was done by another character, right? But this function is, okay, so let's say player 1 has done damage to player 2. You're applying the damage on player 2, but damage is calculated using the level of player 1. So what you do is when you do damage, you throw a character interaction component of player 1. And what happens is when player 2 gets that character interaction component, it can get the owner of that character interaction component, which is player 1. And then it can use this function called getComponentByClass to get the character stats of player 1. And within that, take the level stat value from it. And that's how you do interactions between two player characters or two instances of classes. So that's for you guys who have done some programming before. Okay, any questions left before I guess we start wrapping it up? The next time we do this is either on the weekend or like Friday, Saturday maybe. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or next week on Wednesday again. But the main goal of this is not for everybody to program, but for people, like if you have a really fun game mechanic or game design idea that you really want to see in this game, now you have some background to know what is possible and what would be really difficult to do. One good example of that kind of intuition is the reason why we keep on saying, no, we're not going to do the silver weapon system. Because first, think about it. Weapons are easy. They're just physical attack values and magical attack values, right? But what about the meshes of those? Like, how do we create those meshes? We create them through Blender or some other modeling program. But we have no way of allowing the player to create stuff in the game. There's no way you can create the meshes in the game for the models of the weapons. Unreal Engine does not give you that functionality. And that's why it would be really hard, and that's why most likely we're not doing it. No. Creating your own modeling program is just stupid. Like, it would be easier to just literally put Blender in the engine than to do that, because Blender is open source.
Mm-hmm.
But mainly, if you're making a game mechanic, you have to realize what you can access. So as you saw today, all keyboard keys, you can access that functionality extremely easy. Later on, we might do something on UI, and you'll find that UI stuff is extremely easy to access. So as fancy as you want for the UI, as long as you find someone who can do the art, boom. Any UI, anywhere, we can do that. What else? Let's see. Oh, guild systems. Guild systems are just some UI plus a bunch of numbers, pretty much. We talked about this before, the vibrancy system, where you just take the amount of new players and the amount of levels that they've earned while in the guild. Those are literally a list of new players. You find out how many they are, basically the sum of that list, the sum of elements in that list. Then you add how many levels each of them have earned. And then you multiply that by a percentage and get the increased loot drop rate that guilds get. It's a really simple, really easy system. So that's what you really want. Things that are fairly easy to program, but add a lot of depth to your game. I never said wild bosses drop silver weapons. That doesn't happen. You have to create your own silver weapon anyways. So it doesn't drop from anywhere. By the way, tomorrow is at the same time as today is going to be the lesson on modeling in Blender. And on Friday at this same time is going to be the time for learning animation on Blender. Yeah, the bosses drop the materials that you can use to upgrade your weapons. You can upgrade, it specifically says you can upgrade orange weapons as well. It's not only silver weapons. Upgrading orange quality makes it silver? Okay, I didn't know that. Any other questions? Even if it doesn't work like that, like orange weapons cannot be upgraded into silver, like that's probably the easiest thing that we could do if we want to have silver in the game, because in that case you technically avoid the skin issue, because all weapons can be turned into silver and then leveled accordingly. Any more questions?
Hmm.
Well, if Micus can prove it, then it's pretty much good.
Ooh, interesting. All items made from equipment editor are silver. Uh,
Lemniscate said thanks Canoe.
Okay, you're welcome, guys.
I I summarized some of the stuff, put it into learning.
By the way,
Some of the
Hishimaru,
formulas.
I think I didn't really ask you, but did you understand everything that I said?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I wrote down everything you said.
Mhm.
It's 2 pages right now. And the important stuff isn't programming learning right now.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
the stuff you can understand by writing. And if you want, I have time tomorrow, more time than I want, and I could do a little C for all the people that live on the other side of the planet, like me,
Okay.
and just
Yeah.
retell them what you told us. It's
So
nothing new,
yeah,
so I can
you
do
can
this.
ping anyone that I guess you can see that that's green and active. You can just you can pretty much ping all the fertile minds that are active at
Okay.
that time and anyone else who wants to learn that probably missed today's lesson. Maybe like Dark
So
Chocho
some people,
General and people like that.
some
And
people have to miss it because of time difference.
yeah. So if you can teach that, maybe discuss it with Paul as well because I think Paul also manages the other reverse time zone.
Yeah.
And yeah, so if you two can do that, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. And I guess I'll stop the recording.